You remind me of something that I have seen in a dream. Can I take you out to dinner? Someplace where we can be alone. Can I take you out to dinner? Someplace where we can be alone.
We have regretfully not been able to establish a quorum for the meeting of the Citizens Review Board this evening, so we will have to postpone the meeting, actually cancel the meeting. We have now miraculously established the quorum with Dr. Collins. The vagaries of all things human.
Good evening. My name is Debbie Mercer, and I'm the Secretary of the Citizen Review Board. Current Chair Rashad Akil and Vice Chair Irene Guy have advised they will not be able to attend tonight's meeting. At this time, the Tuesday, February 23rd, 2020 meeting of the Citizen Review Board is not called to order. The board now needs to make a motion to elect a chair pro tem to preside over tonight's meeting.
Any nominations?
Yes, I will nominate Lincoln Tamayo.
I second.
Okay, we have a nomination for Lincoln Tamayo as the chairman for this evening, pro tem, and a second for that. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, I will serve as chairman pro tem of this meeting this evening. Do we need to nominate Secretary Mercer for the vice chair?
No.
Okay, very good. Okay, if we can all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, if you could please call the roll call.
Banks.
Present.
Collins. Present. Simmons.
Present.
Tamayo.
Present.
Reyes.
Present.
Guy. Akil. Blair.
Present.
And Gandala.
Present.
Let the record show that all members of the review board of the CRB are present except for Chairman Akil and Vice Chairman Guy. As this is the first meeting of the calendar year, it is necessary to hold an election for the chair and vice chair. I would ask City Clerk Shirley Fox Knowles to come forward and conduct the election process.
Good evening. Shirley Fox Knowles, City Clerk for the City of Tampa. We will now
conduct the election for chairman and vice chairman for the Citizen Review Board. Here are the election guidelines. The election for the chairman will be held first. Nominations do not require a second. Please wait to be recognized before nominating a candidate. I will open the nominations and close them after all nominations have been made. Votes will be counted by raising the hand. The vote will be taken in the order of the nomination, beginning with the first name nominated. The vote will cease as soon as there is a majority, which in this case requires 3 votes. Having said that, nominations are now in order for the chairman.
I would like to nominate Chairman Akil to serve again as chairman of this board.
Mr. Akil has been nominated. Is there another nomination?
I make the nomination to close.
Okay. Mr. Akil, it's unanimous? Okay, all right. Anybody want to say a few words for him?
He's happy to serve. We're happy to have him.
Okay. Nominations are now in order for the vice chair. Is there a nomination?
I would like to nominate Vice Chairman Irene Guy to serve another term as vice chairman.
Okay.
Close.
Is there another nomination?
Closed on the second.
Okay. It's unanimous then. Anybody want to say a few words for Ms. Guy?
You can repeat.
She's happy to serve. We're happy to have her.
Okay. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Fox Knowles. This meeting is being conducted at the Old City Hall, 315 East Kennedy Street, Adgerley Boulevard, with safety measures and social distancing between the members of the board. This meeting is being live streamed to a larger room here at Old City Hall. This meeting has been noticed by posting on the Tampa Police Department website, postings at Old City Hall, and on the city electronic calendar. This meeting is being conducted live with an in-person quorum present, with the option of participation through in-person kiosks, voicemail, or mail. The public and citizens of the city of Tampa will be able to watch, listen, or view this meeting by cable TV, that's Spectrum Channel 640, Frontier Channel 15, through the internet at www.tampagov.net/live stream, and in person at Old City Hall, and also in person live stream. Use of mask and social distancing inside the Old City Hall are required. I will put this back on and deal with the fogging of my glasses. All written or voicemail comments must be received no later than 24 hours prior to the meeting in order to be made part of the official record of the meeting. Written comments may not exceed 400 words, and live and voicemail comments may not exceed 3 minutes in length. Attorney Schmidt, do we have anyone here for, there's no reason to go through this reading if we have no one to make comments?
There's no reason to go.
Good, thank you.
I understand nobody's downstairs at this time.
Okay. At this time, I'll read the meeting guidelines. Please silence all electronic devices. The duties and responsibilities of the Citizens Review Board are to 1, review completed department investigations involving use of force and cases of importance and interest to the community or the city. 2, determine whether the disposition of reviewed cases was consistent with department policies and procedures. 3, review matters of importance or interest and make recommendations regarding the handling of these matters. 4, determine whether any revisions or additions to department policy and procedures are appropriate in reviewing matters of or importance or interest. And 5, report findings and recommendations to the mayor and chief of police. Cases that are brought before the Citizens Review Board are closed internal affairs cases that have been investigated and brought to the police chief for disposition, and we have one this evening. It is the CRB's job to review the cases and render an opinion as to whether the investigation was done according to department policies and procedures. The CRB members are provided the investigative files in advance of the meeting. The CRB will hear from the department whenever matters of interest or importance are requested for review by the board or the department. As will be further discussed by me, members of the public will have an opportunity to address the CRB, and we're not going to be doing that tonight. The coordinator for the board is Captain Kevin Schoolmeesters. Any person who wishes to make a complaint concerning a matter which may be considered by the Professional Standards Bureau should see Captain Schoolmeesters for information on how to file a complaint. I am responsible for maintaining an appropriate business-like decorum during the meeting. I'll try my best. The board should not discuss matters where the city or the department may likely be a party in litigation. The public comment portion of the meeting is coming up, and it is not coming up, so we are going to dispense with that. First on the agenda for tonight is the approval of the minutes. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting?
Chair, Chair Mike Schmidt, could you just go ahead and, I know I said there was somebody downstairs, but can you go ahead and make sure nobody's downstairs, and then you can close public comment. So go ahead and open public comment, close public comment.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and open this meeting for public comment. Do we have anyone in the docks downstairs for public comment? Seeing that we have no one downstairs in the docks for public comment, we will go on to the next matter on the agenda, and that is the approval of the minutes of the meeting of this last December. Do we have a motion to approve? And I'm sorry, that's October, the meeting of October 27th. Right. Oh, that's right, because we were not able to approve. So we need to approve both the minutes of the October meeting, which we could not approve in December because we did not have a quorum then, and a meeting of the minutes of the December meeting as well.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve these minutes.
Okay. We have a
Second.
A second.
okay, we have a move and a second. All in favor of approval of both minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes for both meetings are approved. We will now move to Community and Tampa Police Department matters. We still have for our consideration the 2019 CRB report, which has been provided to this board. This report was provided along with a report concerning all internal affairs cases reviewed. And there was some confusion last month with the two reports. The only report this board needs to approve is the 2019 CRB report. I would ask for a motion approving that report and ask Detective Katie Thanasis with Professional Standards to come forward to answer any questions of the board. First, are there any questions for Detective Thanasis?
There was some question. There was, the only thing on the annual report, if that's the one we're referencing, there were some numbers that they were gonna bring back some clarity on. I think we knew what they were, but we were just trying to get clarity on them. And that's
Those
what
were
I-
not on the CRB annual report. Those are on the Professional Standards annual report.
Not the professional.
We cleared that up last time. It's actually a different report they were looking at. Those are not on the CRB annual report.
The CRB annual report, and I got it, okay. If that's what you said. I was
Mr.
looking
Chairman,
for-
I move to approve the 2019 annual report.
Second.
Are there any other questions of Detective Thanasis? Detective, thank you very much. So we have a move to approve and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The annual report of 2019 is approved unanimously. Okay, at the last meeting, this board was provided an update on the proposed changes to the CRB before City Council. It's our understanding that the proposed changes for the CRB have been reset for a workshop on the 25th.
Chair.
On Thursday. Therefore, I don't believe that there's any update for the board at this time. However, I would ask Attorney Schmidt, please come forward to provide any additional information. If you have any, Attorney Schmidt, we'd appreciate it.
Good evening, Board. I provided each one of you a copy of the proposed revisions to Section 18-8, the Citizens Police Review Board for the Tampa Police Department. These are being heard as agenda item number 2 on Thursday at the City Council workshop. You are encouraged to, of course, read over the proposed revisions. And of course, you can also call in to participate if you wish to call in to the workshop. There will also be a downstairs kiosk for members of the public who wish to come and comment on this agenda item. That's currently the update. We'll see. We'll be in front of City Council on Thursday.
I had a question. This document, this was the clean version. Is there any way we could get a red line version so we can see what the proposed changes are, what the differences are?
Yes, ma'am. I think the clean version is approximately 14 pages, and then attached to that is the red line version.
Thank you.
You got it.
Thank you, Mr. Schmidt. We've skipped along here a little bit. We should go back to the review of the investigation that we attempted in December. We're not able to, so PSB IAU case number 19R-007. If you can please ask the police department to please step forward and present that case.
It's actually going to be Police Report 2019-618-336. I'm Detective Gary Sandell with Internal Affairs. This case originally was Detective Neil Smith's case for the Internal Affairs part. The case was investigated by Detective Kenny Neitlinger. He was the original case agent, and I'll read a synopsis, or basically a summation of the case, and if you have any questions, I'll be available for it. I also have the State Attorney's Office, the clearance letter that they provide. So on November 28, 2019, at approximately 1:48 hours in the afternoon, Tampa Police Department dispatch received a call from 106 Flora Street East, in which a complainant, Stephanie Ellisale, stated that she heard 2 gunshots about 2 minutes ago, but that no one was seen. At 1:53 p.m., a call was received from 207 Cluster Avenue East, and an Andrew Rivera indicated to call takers that a black male with dreadlocks, last seen wearing no shirt and boxers, has a gun, was walking around his backyard. He looked out his window to the shed in his backyard, which was rented to a Johanna Corneal, and observed the shed door was open. Rivera then saw Johanna's estranged husband, who he identified as Derek, known later as Derek Everett, standing in the door of the shed with a semi-automatic handgun at his side. At this point, Rivera stated that he knew they had argued in the past and was worried for Corneal's safety, so he called 911. Sergeant Pecora and Officer Dauphin responded to the dispatch call for service. Both officers were wearing their short-sleeve uniform with their badges and police insignia when they arrived. Sergeant Pecora first made contact with a Yolanda Fredericks in the front yard of 207 Cluster Avenue, who stated there was a man with a gun in the backyard. Fredericks then went back into the house to get 911 complainant Rivera. Rivera indicated that a black male with dreadlocks was in the backyard with a gun who was with a female subject, and he had fired 2 rounds. While Sergeant Pecora was speaking with Rivera, Fredericks emerged from the main house and told Sergeant Pecora they're fighting in the shed and he has a gun. This shed we're talking about is almost like a pool house. It was next to the pool area, and it was utilized basically as an apartment at this time. So Sergeant Pecora and Officer Dauphin moved through the house and into the backyard onto the pool deck. The shed, or like I referred to as a pool house, was elevated, which allowed the door to clear the patio by a considerable difference, and as a result, they could see feet under the door, thus giving Officer Dauphin an exact location of the subject. Sergeant Pecora stepped in front of the open door, and Officer Dauphin stayed behind several feet back from the open door. Immediately after stepping into the view of the subject, Sergeant Pecora observed Derek Everett crouched down in the doorway. Sergeant Pecora observed Everett's left hand where she saw the butt of a handgun and realized he was holding what she knew to be a firearm. Sergeant Pecora stated, "Police, don't move, drop the gun, drop the gun." Everett ignored these commands and instead raised the firearm and pointed it at Johanna Corneal in the shed, who was inside on a bed. Sergeant Pecora believed that Everett was about to shoot Corneal, who she described as having a look of pure terror on her face. In order to protect Corneal from being shot by Everett, Sergeant Pecora was forced to use deadly force and subsequently fired her handgun, striking at Everett. Simultaneously, Officer Dauphin feared for the life of Sergeant Pecora and began firing through the thin aluminum door of the shed, directly above where she could see Everett's feet. Everett rose up and turned, pointing the gun at Sergeant Pecora briefly as she continued firing until he fell backwards. At this point, Everett dropped the firearm, and Sergeant Pecora and Officer Dauphin began to render first aid. Everett was transported to St. Joseph Hospital, where he succumbed to his wounds. Now the findings were, and then I'll read the State Attorney's Office version of the findings and what they've decided. Sergeant Pecora and Officer Dauphin were forced to put themselves into harm's way to protect the life of Johanna Corneal. When Derek Everett was observed holding a firearm and refused to obey commands from Sergeant Pecora, he instead raised the handgun and pointed it towards Johanna Corneal. Sergeant Pecora had no choice but to use deadly force. From Officer Dauphin's limited vantage point and fearing for the life of Sergeant Pecora, who in fact was in mortal danger, Officer Dauphin also utilized deadly force. Both officers were carrying and fired their SIG firearms that they're issued. I believe by skimming through the report, Sergeant Pecora fired several rounds, and Officer Dauphin shot 4 rounds. And then the State Attorney letter reads as follows. Dear Chief Dugan, the State Attorney's Office has completed a review of the investigation of the use of force by Sergeant Felicia Pecora and Officer Hope Dauphin on November 28, 2019. Members of my staff responded to the incident scene, observed a reconstruction of events at that location, and participated in the interview of witnesses. Based on our review and analysis of the relevant facts and law, and pursuant to Florida State statute, the use of deadly force by Officer Hope Dauphin and Sergeant Felicia Pecora was justified pursuant to Florida statutes. No criminal charges will be filed against Sergeant Pecora or Officer Dauphin.
Detective Sandell, thank you very much for that report. I just have a few questions.
Sure.
The initial call came in at 1:48, and then there was another call that came in at 1:53. Do we have a pretty firm idea of when the sergeant and officer arrived on the scene?
look at that real quick.
Just want this to be instructive to our fellow citizens and the public on standard, police procedure and how quickly we respond to issues like this.
I'm just looking where dispatch information would be. It'll just take me a second to find it.
Detective, while you're looking, do you know whether Sergeant Pecora and Officer Dauphin came together in the same vehicle, in separate vehicles?
Separate vehicles, sir.
Okay, in separate vehicles. And may we assume that they came without sirens and lights? And is that standard procedure for answering a call like this?
This would have been a priority call, but the likelihood of them using sirens and stuff when you've got something in progress like that, unless they're going through a lot of traffic, the idea is to try to get there to protect the public as opposed to alarming.
Exactly.
Correct.
So again, we just want to inform the public of what the standard procedure is. So they were not coming with sirens blaring and lights flashing and.
Not for a call with a person with a gun. No, they would not do that.
Okay.
When same thing like a burglary in progress, we wouldn't go lights and siren to that.
Right.
So while we're looking for the dispatch, if you see that call that kind of canceled it out and then called it back, so how many calls was actually made?
There wasn't a canceled call.
Okay.
There was a call that was issued by the first person,
Okay.
and they started responding, and then there was a second call. So there was ever no cancel call.
There was not a call where someone canceled back, because that's what I read in there, that someone.
I'll look. Like I
Okay.
said, this isn't my case. This is Detective Neil Smith's case.
Okay.
I'll see if I can find
I
it.
was just saying, since you're looking under the dispatch, you might see that call.
Sure.
Because one was saying, oh, okay, it's okay, and then I thought I saw where another call was made. Just
Okay.
Yeah, the gentleman that owned the house called, and then after he checked on her, he thought she was okay, and then he called back to say
it's
fine.
okay.
Right.
And then they called the
neighbors-
911
right,
again.
exactly.
Yeah, when we get 911 calls, we usually go to them anyways, even if they're canceled. Especially if there's a possibility it's domestic related, we don't just not go.
Okay.
We
And I
still
think
go-
that's
we
even
still
good
respond
for
to
the
those.
community to know.
Regardless if somebody called and canceled or not, we would still go to that.
And Detective, I believe I asked this in December, but I just want to reinforce this for the record. Both Sergeant Pecora and Officer Dauphin were clearly identified in uniform as Tampa Police Department officers.
Their uniforms are similar to my captain's uniform, except short sleeve. So yeah, definitely with the badge and with the patches. Sergeant Pecora would have yellow 3 stripes. I mean, it's very obvious who they are. And they also announced who they are based on the interviews.
And this was in broad daylight, so there were no weather conditions, no rain, dark clouds, fog, haze, anything that would obstruct a good
This was the
visual.
middle of the day. I don't believe so, sir.
Exactly. Okay. Were there any witnesses, like say Mr. Rivera, Ms. Fredericks, or even Ms. Corniel, who was the victim at the time, that witnessed that could corroborate that the officer had said, "Don't move, drop the gun, drop the gun"?
I'd have to read through the whole report to find that. I think you guys all have a majority of it, except what is taken out information-wise. I know that
But it's pretty
everybody
established
was
on the record
interviewed.
that command was made by the officer.
Yes.
And that the witnesses that they had all collaborated and was consistent with the officer's report. That's the other one.
Yeah.
And I didn't.
I don't know that the
actually had
witnesses
the-
witnessed the
I
actual
actually
shooting.
Yes,
I don't know
Yeah,
that.
everybody said they didn't see the shooting, they heard the gunshots stop and then resumed. And somebody said they saw her or whatever. I just want to make sure that all those agree.
Can you maybe also explain how you can see feet under a door?
Well, it's kind of
Yeah.
explained in what I just read. The door had a gap between the bottom of the door and the pull deck. And if the inside of the shed is illuminated, you're going to see feet.
Then it said she's-
Yeah, I don't see,
I'll look for it while they question.
okay.
And a detective, it looks like Sergeant Pecora fired two rounds and Officer Dolphin 4.
In reading the supplement that Detective Chris Salea did, he did the scene. What they do is they separate it. They have there'll be a lead detective, and then there'll be a second that helps the lead detective. Then there'll be a scene detective. Detective Salea collected two 9mm casings from inside the pool, actually in the pool itself, and then 4 outside. And I believe when they did a count, when they counted the magazine count, like inside of our gun, when we pull our magazine out, when they count them, there were 4 missing in Dolphin's gun and 2 missing in Pecora's. So,
Okay.
you know, that's pretty much
And
how we know how many shots.
when Sergeant Pecora and Officer Dolphin arrived, I think it was Mr. Rivera who had said that 2 shots had been fired by the subject.
And they never recovered .40 caliber casings. So,
Yeah, but that allegedly happened before the officers even arrived on the scene.
that's correct. If the information about their arrival time, because usually they'll announce on the rate, if that's not in this book, in this red book, it can be provided to you all as well if it's
Yeah,
not
I'm
okay.
just trying
Sure.
to shed light for our citizens
Sure.
of the response time of our department when we get calls like this.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, I have a question. So, in reviewing the case earlier today, just for my edification on the reasonable use of deadly force, my understanding is you had the 2 police officers, Pecora and Dolphin. Pecora was the one who confronted the subject and was the one who dispensed with the 2 rounds. If I understand correctly, reading the report, Dolphin could hear Pecora say, "Drop the gun," and saw Pecora back away and then discharge a round. Between Dolphin and the subject was a door.
Yes.
She could see the feet, but if
Yes.
I'm not mistaken, she could not actually see the firearm or the subject dispensing with the firearm against Pecora. Is that correct?
That's correct. She could
Okay.
only hear the commands that the sergeant was making to the subject.
So in other words, for the justification of the use of deadly force on her part, because she dispensed 4 rounds, it was a combination of seeing the feet of the subject, hearing her police officer making that overt warning, backing away, and then discharging the firearm. In its totality, all of those constituted, in her mind, the use and the justification of reasonable force.
Yes, and you're there, your original call is a man with a gun.
Right.
So all of that
Okay.
together, yes, sir.
Understand. Thank
Yes,
you.
sir.
Any other questions for Detective? Any other questions for Detective Sandell? Any discussion from the board members?
We're waiting on one of your answers. Because I'm trying to figure out how many calls, even though I know you said. And that all of them agreed.
I'm sorry, Dr. Collins?
I was just saying, I was just waiting on that one with the calls because I know I saw the other call in there, so I'm trying to find out, did the
Okay.
dispatch actually
Okay.
reflect that? And I appreciate letting the audience know that when it's a call of that nature and the importance of it, that they come anyway.
Yes.
But I'd like to know. And then the other one was, I was trying to read and I kind of reread today's as well, trying to read the position from each of the witnesses, the handwritten little statements that we saw. And I was trying to make sure that all of those kind of synced with the officers and their final report.
So I have the information that you requested, ma'am.
Yes, sir.
So it looks like, it says 13:57, that's military time. So at 1:57, shots fired. So I'll go back, actually, let me go back to 1:52. That's when somebody thought they had fireworks in their backyard. At 1:53, there's a man with dreads with no shirt, boxers, he has a gun. And at 1:56, it says male 10-0, which means there's a male with a gun. And then at 1:57, they silence the radio, which they say 10-3. It means no chatter on the radio at all because you have officers arriving. And then at 1:57, probably within a few seconds of this, because it goes to the silencing the radio to the shots fired. So to say when they arrived there, looks like about 1:56, and the shots were fired about a minute later at 1:57. So that would be, it's about right, because a priority one call, we get there within 6 minutes or less, I believe, or 8 minutes or less.
I'm sorry, Detective, when you say the shots fired by the officers, by Sergeant Pecora and Officer Dauphin?
When radio hears shots fired, that's one of us saying shots fired. So yes, that would have been the officers saying shots fired. So the shot started at 1:57.
I think 150 is when the original fireworks, from reading the case, they thought were fireworks. It was like 150.
So they're dispatched at 1:48, and they arrived somewhere around 1:53, 1:56, and then the confrontation occurred where they said 10-3, which means I need the air to be quiet. And they say that they've got to, right at that time, they say that they have a male that's 10-0, means they have a male with a gun. And then the next minute, at 1:57 is when they say shots are fired.
So
it's all kind of, takes a few minutes. Whatever dialogue Sergeant Pecora had before lasted a minute or less, long enough for her to tell him to put his hands up and that they're the police. And then that's when the shots were fired.
So from the initial call to at least the arrival to that residence from Sergeant Pecora and Officer Dauphin, we're talking about 7 minutes tops.
Yes.
The arrival.
That's between the two of them.
And Detective Sandell, from your experience, is this pretty commonplace? This kind of response time with calls like this, that officers are responding to the scene and arriving on the scene in anywhere from 5 to 7 minutes.
Yes, I was actually working in homicide at this time. I was in there for 13 years, so yes, it's kind of flows with what occurred. Everything matched. There was no inconsistencies with anything that was said or any of the evidence that we had.
Thank you.
And this is just for my own clarity, so when we vote. It appears, and I might have read it wrong, and I saw the diagram, and I may not have understood it exactly well when they showed the diagram and the report. But did the officers go through the house, both of them, or did one go through the house and did one go outside?
They both went through the house, worked
They
their
all
way
went
through
through
the
the
house
house.
to the back where the pool area was at, ma'am.
Okay.
Any other questions for Detective Sandell? Detective, thank you very much for it. Any further discussion from board members?
Let me, the spouse who had moved away from the husband, she has lodged no complaints or anything of that.
I'm sorry.
What-
Dr. Collins,
can you hear me?
And please also feel free to take off your mask if you like.
Okay. The only question I had is, because the spouse had moved away from her husband and he showed up there, I was asking, are there any concerns or complaints against what has happened from the spouse? That was the only question I had. Just trying to make sure she hasn't.
So have there been any complaints made by the spouse, by the estranged wife?
I don't think there were no complaints made with like professional standards or internal affairs. I think on scene, obviously, she's going to be upset. But there were problems they had ongoing up to this point. But other than her being upset about the incident that occurred, obviously she's going to be distraught, but there was no further complaints or anything.
Okay. That's what I was trying to find.
Okay.
So I'll entertain a motion that the findings of the Professional Standards Bureau are either consistent or inconsistent with Tampa Police Department policies.
So move that it is consistent with Tampa Police Department's policy.
Thank you, Reverend Banks. Do we have a second? Okay, all right, all in favor that the findings of the PSB are consistent with TPD policies, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
No one opposed? That is, it is approved unanimously by the CRB. We will skip to the next agenda item. At the last meeting, this board was provided an update on the proposed changes to the CRB before City Council. It's my understanding that the proposed changes for CRB are going to be made on the 25th. But Dr. Collins also indicated some concerns for discussion, which the board voted to come back today to discuss. The first one is the schedule of meetings, the scheduling of meetings. So what do we wish to discuss concerning the scheduling of meetings?
If I could have the opportunity to mention something. I am concerned and want to make sure of the safety of both the board members as well as staff. However, because of the purpose of CRB, I do not want us to be in a mode where we are not meeting in order to address what the concerns are in the community. We then begin, in my personal opinion, to defeat the whole purpose behind the board. And so for that reason, and with thanks the city and everyone for securing this, and we don't have to go down to the convention center and we're back here. I just want to make sure that we agreed to go to every other month meetings. Those meetings were designed on a trial basis, and I kind of felt, based on everything that was happening in the city and with the pandemic, that perhaps we should go back to a monthly meeting, because it appears that there are times when, if the numbers are high, if things is not as it is, that we have not been meeting, and we've been far beyond every other meeting. So I would like to go on the premise that we go back to monthly meetings, not saying that we will meet monthly. Because if the conditions are not conducive, I would suggest that we not meet. But I would like to consider us, that was a trial, and in my opinion, the trial is over with, and I would like to see us go back to a monthly schedule. And there's a supplement to that. The monthly schedule doesn't mean that we'll be here in person meeting on a monthly basis. We had the opportunity to do a workshop before, and I have asked, and this is my opportunity to ask in the presence of the board, that even if we cannot meet in person or we don't feel at this time it's safe for the remainder of 2021, that we do that every other meeting, and perhaps if we could do it in the form of a workshop and we do it with Zoom or some fashion, since there are limitations as to us meeting outside of this public venue.
And those meetings would also be open to the public?
Yes. Mhm.
I don't know if we're allowed to meet via Zoom because we're in the sunshine. Can we do that, Attorney Schmidt? Even if it's a workshop, are we allowed to meet virtually?
And before you answer, just make sure, I'm not saying a regular meeting.
I said
I'm
even if
clearly
it's a
saying the
workshop.
workshop like we did over at the law office building that day,
Yeah.
which was outside. And so it wouldn't be per se a meeting, but if there are things that we need to be brought up to date on, things that we need to read and be sure, or if there was some things that we wanted to do, even like what the city is proposing now, a detailed workshop on something like that in between the meetings, if those things are feasible. I know I've asked, and I'm not sure where we are with it, and I do know what our restrictions are as it relates to our state statute, whatever we have. But I do know we've already, precedent being set, we've already had a workshop type meeting. And that's what my question is. I'd like for us to go back to monthly, but it may not always be in person.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Collins. I totally understand your rationale and reasoning for wanting to have meetings virtually. Unfortunately, because of sunshine laws, we do have to have them in person right now. When the Phase 3 order of the governor came about, the governor did not also renew the ability of local governments to have virtual meetings. So right now, sunshine law is going to require all meetings to be in person. The past workshop that you're discussing was still an in-person meeting. It just was moved from this venue to the other venue, which was still obviously open to the public and advertised at that location. So we can move the venue if we wanted to, and we could even have a subcommittee meeting of a smaller number, but we still always have to meet in public at this time.
Agreeing with the meetings. That workshop, we are considering that was a meeting, because I'm not sure if we
That
did
was
all
meeting.
of those requirements with that meeting that we had there. Because there was no,
We did advertise it, if you recall, and then we did, they put up signs, and the public was able to go and access the meeting just like any other meeting. So it was open to the public. It was advertised as a meeting. It was a workshop meeting, as you mentioned, but it was fully open to the public.
still had to do all those requirements were still required. Okay, that being the case, then I would say that I still recommend that what we did on a trial, we should go back to our regular schedule.
My understanding is that we are set to schedule meetings now on a monthly basis. And we're indeed scheduled for next month.
So we are back on our monthly
We-
schedule. Okay.
Yes, there was a motion made back in, I want to say October, for us to go back to having monthly meetings, and it was passed back then.
Okay, because I couldn't remember what it had. It's too much time to.
And so I would assume that there is no motion to go back to bi-monthly. That we're good with doing monthly meetings at this time. And if there's nothing, literally nothing to discuss, we can always cancel.
Exactly,
that meeting.
exactly.
Very good.
Okay, thank you.
The second issue was the possibility of outside counsel to work with the CRB. Any discussion there?
That was another one that I suggested. I will thank publicly the city legal staff and attorneys who actually gave a considerable amount of information. I had a chance to talk with them. They sent me a plethora of data. And I would say that if we could use that one as a presentation before the CRB rather than us actually picking it up to kind of vote or address it at this time. But what I heard is something that I think would be beneficial for the full board to hear.
Okay, so a presentation from
The city.
the city attorney,
yeah.
okay.
I was just asked that in that presentation that there be some type of, cost, like how they will be paid, be included in that, because we don't have a budget.
Yeah. Mhm. It was pretty. And the presentation was not saying we should do it. It was, yeah, but it was giving that full thing. And I think it would be good for all of us to hear what I heard.
So,
And it's
Ms.
pretty
Mercer,
good.
if we could just make sure that that's placed on the agenda for the March 23 meeting. Mr. Schmidt.
Chair, just to point out that that exact item has been discussed with City Council right now, and it's been being discussed obviously for a few months, and so maybe
And it's also being discussed on
it'll
Thursday.
probably be discussed Thursday again in front of City Council. So they are fully aware of this item, and they are currently discussing it. My only concern would be that, if City Council were to make their decision, and then we come and bring this back and present it again, I don't know if we're just stirring a pot for unnecessary reasons.
The city council can decide on Thursday to appoint outside counsel?
Those have been part of the discussions, whether that could be something, whether there's a lot of issues there, a lot of unpacking there, and I don't really want to get into it all right now before you, but we can present all those issues if you really want, but the bottom line is I would advise you to maybe watch on Thursday, and maybe next month this would be more timely to come back and say, do we need that presentation still? Rather than asking the city attorney to come down here and present that issue. If we can wait, watch Thursday, come back next month, and decide if we still want this presentation. If that makes sense. I think this matter has already been flushed out by City Council, or will be on Thursday, and I would prefer that we wait and see what happens on Thursday in front of City Council before we ask the city attorney to come down and give a presentation on this issue.
And I
Can't the
don't,
presentation be reflective of whatever city council, if they make a decision on Thursday, can't the presentation include that? Or am I misunderstanding?
and when you answer, my question is almost the same. When I talked with them, they gave me their opinion, and it may not have been what I really wanted to hear, but what I appreciated was a very detailed presentation that they said that City Council had asked of them. And since this is something that we're concerned about, I asked the question, could you do that presentation to the board, to the CRB?
Yes.
And she said, if that's something that you guys are interested in. If this document, Exhibit A that we have here now, has the potential for being passed on 2/25, when it come before us, they would tell us what has passed. If it's not passed, but it received and we listen to it and we hear those explanations, because that is not the only thing in here, would it, and I'm asking you a question now, would it be beneficial to us to have them scheduled for March so that the presentation that we've never had, we would have an opportunity to hear? And even if it passed and they're going to ultimately pass it in a meeting that's not a workshop, if they don't do it in the workshop, we have a better understanding to ask questions to know what it's about. But I do agree with you to listen to it on the 25th. And then at the same time, is it possible that we can ask them to be prepared to let us know whatever the final decisions were, or to give us the explanation? What I got was good.
So if I hear you, like in March, a presentation either about what has been passed or what is still being considered.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I would just prefer that we can just have a motion in a second to set it on the agenda. We'll set what you guys decide on the agenda.
I make a motion that we ask for a presentation for the city legal counsel to address the outside counsel.
I second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor of Dr. Collins' motion?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. I just would like to make a comment. We already have a process in place that ensures, working through the city attorney, that this entire process stays on the rails. I, for the life of me, do not understand why there's any discussion whatsoever of adding yet another legal, quasi-governmental layer to this process. It's just, to me, it's just another example of government growth, simply because there's oxygen to allow it to grow. We already have a legal process in place to make sure that this board, working with the police department, stays on the rails. Why do we need another layer of legality? I would be firmly opposed to adding such a layer, but that's just me.
And Lincoln, I would say, I'm not at this point for or against it. I'm in a position of education. I want to know, because this is one of the things that have surfaced in this city during all the Black Lives Matter issues. It also has surfaced all over the country, and it would behoove us to be educated on the issues so that if something was to surface, then we would already be poised to know exactly which way we want to
Dr.
go.
Collins, I could not agree with you more, but there should be some more discussion but I've just heard from Mr.
Yeah.
Schmidt that there's a possibility that the city council can decide on Thursday that we're going to have an extra layer of counsel.
I don't-
That's not a way to run an airline.
So I don't mean to imply that city council can or cannot. I mean that this issue has been debated with city council. And so I was asking that we wait till Thursday and see how this plays out. I believe this is all, hopefully, this will be,
I just
hopefully
hope we
this
don't
will all
have it
be.
foisted on us, and then we're then presented in March of how we are going to be working with separate independent counsel.
Well, I mean, the city attorney's office may have a different position than what
Than the city council.
has, and that's
And
where
why
I'm
we
sort
need
of
to be informed.
trying to not get into all that tonight.
Okay.
But fair to say that the discussions have been had for several months about this issue. And the city attorney's office is working hard on trying to reach a resolution with city council, and hopefully that will happen on Thursday.
All the more reason why I'd like to see the presentation on, because it sounds like it had some pros and cons to why you would or would not, and we haven't had the benefit of being a part of any of that. So that's why I'm looking forward to that during the March meeting.
And that's what my biggest concern, this is about this board and us, and everybody else been talking about it. And it bothered me even greater when I found out that outside organizations have been informed and met with them about it, and we have not been approached at all.
Okay. The next issue was that total number of people signed up for public comment and setting a time limit for public comment.
I just want to say this about public comment, and I wasn't at the October, I think I missed the October meeting. Whatever rules we have around public comment, I want to see us follow those rules. And we didn't do that at the summer meeting. I mean, there were no rules being followed. And for me, whatever the rules are, and maybe this is me being a military kid, I want to see those rules followed. And then it's our responsibility as the board to ensure that those rules are followed. I mean, I know there are some things in the minutes. I mean, there were people speaking to us directly, multiple people speaking, same people speaking multiple times. So, I mean, whatever we decide, if it's going to be 3 minutes and you got one shot at it, if it's going to be 7 minutes, I just want to make sure that we as a board have control over our own rules and that we follow those, if that makes sense.
Make a lot of
Couldn't agree
sense.
with you more.
Make a lot of sense. And the fact that we had people who was refusing to give their address and things of that nature, or was giving nicknames. And if they're not willing to give that and something substantive is mentioned and we can't follow it back up, because we don't have accurate information. And the reason I actually said a time limit, I have noticed other public boards in the city, when they notice they have a large number of individuals, if their standard time is 3 minutes, they will drop it based on the number of people. So they've set up a certain hour or whatever, and then they'll divide it and say it's going to be 2 minutes each, rather. Or in some instances, they may allow you to speak 3 minutes, and if you're speaking on a couple of the issues, they'll give you 6 or 5 minutes. But if the list is so long, you only get 2 minutes.
But in our case, if we had just adhered to the 3 minutes and the single speaker, that would have been one thing. So again, I don't have a strong opinion. I want to make sure that the public has an opportunity to voice, especially when there's something big going on. And if there's 100 people that want to voice that, so be it. I want to hear from them. But it's also not fair to other people who may not get an opportunity to speak if we don't follow our own rules.
Amen. Any other discussion?
I'm gonna put one more point down so it'll be in the records. In the event we end up with a 300 list of people that want to speak, with the potential for us to be in there all night, it would be good if we have business to take care of, which is one of the reasons why some of our reports are delayed, that we go ahead and allocate a time up front, take care of our business, and do the other public agenda items after the completion of our business.
Is it possible to have a time limit for public comment as opposed to trying to hear 300 people in one night?
Yeah,
So you're saying not necessarily a time limit per speaker, but a time limit on the agenda
For the
that
meeting
says,
day.
All of the above. The time limit can be adjusted. For
we-
example, if we have 45 minutes set aside, if we have excess numbers of people, that would not allow us to have 3 minutes. If we wanted to consolidate it to 1 minute or 2 minutes to accommodate more people, we could do that, but still have a cap of the amount of time that we would appropriate for the public comment. Because you could be exhausted to the point you'd be here to the next day if it's, and I don't know if it's a violation of any policy that we have a designated time set for that purpose.
Mr. Schmidt, are you aware of any such limits?
Yeah, I think generally, the best practice would be to move it from 3 minutes to 2 minutes or 1 minute based on the number signed up. But you could set we're going to reserve 1 hour, 2 hours for public comment. Typically, though, when it gets to the end, what you see is we try not to prohibit people from, we obviously want people to be able to give public comments, so typically that time gets extended as needed. We try not to allow a set time period to cut people off from giving public comment, other than setting a reasonable time, 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, as the board may allow. But I will certainly continue to look into that matter and give advice if we come upon that situation. So rather than locking it in right now, I'm doing the attorney answer of definite maybe. How's that?
Well, the other thing is perhaps if we had some type of quote-unquote training for handling an unruly crowd, so to speak.
Right.
One of the things that you have to be careful of is to allow them to draw you into the emotion of the moment, where you start responding from an emotional perspective as opposed to staying objective, not necessarily responding or reacting, but just carrying out whatever the rules are.
and maybe restating the rules to, if we see it becoming emotional, something like that.
Yeah, for example, someone comes up and say, well, I'm not going to give you my name, or I'm not going to give you my address. What do? Do you allow them to speak, or is there someone there that can help to control the crowd or whatever? Because it can become
Technically, at the beginning of all of our meetings, when it's read, it says you have to give your name, your address, you have 3 minutes to speak, and that if you don't sign up, you don't get to speak, which signing up to me would mean you do all of those things, right? But to your point, Reverend Banks, I don't know what happens if, like you said, if somebody decides to give a nickname or they refuse to give their address.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what the recourse, if you will, is for doing that. And I certainly don't know that that's our bailiwick as members of the CRB.
I would suggest that I would tell you that after the October meeting, the chair did meet with members of staff and as well as the clerk's office, and to brush up on these same ideas that you're talking about, Reverend Banks. And that's why you'll notice in December, there was additional decorum given about how things were going to be handled. Most of that came from the policies and procedures, and it was a little bit stronger language. The chair has the ability to make sure it's run in a business-like decorum, which is why that's emphasized so heavily at the beginning of the proceedings. The chair can establish the rules to make sure that the business-like decorum is set, not only just with professional manner and professional speech, like a business meeting would be held, but I think the reason the name issue is a little more difficult. So if somebody wants to come forward, the name is important for the clerk who's taking the minutes to make sure that they know who is speaking and what was said. I don't know that it's a hard and fast requirement that somebody gets up there and gives their name and address. It's a recommendation. It helps everybody. It helps the minutes. That's the main reason for asking people to do that. I don't know that we want to deny someone a right to public comment if they say, my name is Scooby-Doo, within the boundary that they're still acting professional.
Well, those are the kind of things we definitely need to understand, so that if someone got up and said Scooby-Doo, and it was not necessarily a hard and fast rule for that to be the case, for us to not to try to force a person to give their name or force a person to give some information that they were not necessarily comfortable giving publicly, if that is in case of allowable process.
Agreed.
So that's what I'm saying. We would need to know how to handle situations so that we can handle them according to whatever the policy is, and we can be consistent from this point forward.
Correct. And I think part of that was, I think it's a good conversation. It's a conversation that was had with the chair post-October. And obviously because of sunshine, we didn't get to have it with the board. But yes, the chair should understand, and it's still going to be Chair Quill, should understand these rules and understand that it's his or her job to keep the decorum. Scooby-Doo, for example, would need to be, maybe requested. Could you please give your whole name? Because obviously that's going to probably get chuckling out of the audience and things are going to start getting out of control. So the chair is going to need to request the name, ask the crowd to quiet down, and try to keep a professional decorum. If the person continues to act up and misbehave, then the chair needs to get control of that. If the person refuses, the strategy of the chair and consultation with others was probably the best thing to do was to say, we're going to adjourn this meeting. And then that's why the procedure was told to them in December, if you act out of line, we will adjourn this meeting. We will take a 10-minute recess. We'll all stand up and leave. And that's going to, hurt the members of the public who want to be heard. That's going to, obviously be a delay for everybody, and it's going to be unfortunate. But hopefully that will get the crowd to settle down and act appropriately. When you return, you would again begin with your meeting. If the crowd or person continues to misbehave, you could take another recess, or you could just adjourn the meeting for the next month. That would unfortunately punish everybody who was there who was behaving correctly, but it would send a strong message that we're not going to tolerate things getting out of control. The other option, which is not as favorable, is the chair can warn the person, tell them they're out of order, continue to tell them they're out of order. And at some point, if they're violating the rules and the directions of the chair does have some authority to ask that that person be removed. Our concern was, this is, obviously we're here as a voluntary board. We don't want to get into a situation where we're having an officer confront a citizen with what was potentially a hostile person or crowd.
that would only make matters worse. So we didn't like that avenue. We would prefer the board take a recess. If the matter couldn't get corralled and the crowd wasn't acting appropriately, we would just recess for a month. We would, sorry, it's getting a little hot under this mask. We would take a recess until the next month. We would adjourn.
So that explains to me what your philosophy is as it relates to handling in those kinds of situations. You would avoid the confrontational aspect of it, recess, have people to have an opportunity to calm down, then come back, repeat that if necessary. So that helps us to understand which direction to go as opposed to taking a hardline stance and causing law enforcement to get involved in terms of escorting someone out, because that would be the last resort that you'd want to do under this circumstance in light of all that is going on.
Yes, sir. And I think, as, obviously there's going to be case-by-case situations. If we're talking about, tonight there wasn't anybody who showed up. If there was one person who showed up and tried to, act rudely and wouldn't let this meeting occur, well, then maybe that would be a different scenario. I don't know that you want to recess if it's just one person, but still, you get the idea. Certainly at the time back in October, and even now, we're really trying to avoid confrontation with the public. That's in no one's interest.
Okay, I can appreciate that.
Thanks so much. And I think it's great to be able to talk about this not when it's happening, because when it happened, then we were all in that position. And I appreciate the work that you guys did in the chair to come back afterwards and explain that when we did in December. But I still concerned that we established the fact that if we have a very large attendees who wants to speak, that we adjust our time from 3 minutes so that we would minimize the extension. That's one. And the second one is, if there are some things that we need to take care of and we leave public comments where they are, I think if it's that large, and we never know when something may happen, as a board, if there's some issues that we need to address, I think we need to cease the public comment at whatever time by telling people that up front, take care of some business we need to address, and put the public comments on the end. And I know it's being done at other boards here in the city that are public boards, so there's no reason that we can't prepare in advance so that we don't get caught up in that kind of corner. But thanks so much.
Thank you. Then the final issue was the noticing of meetings. I think that had to do more with how we market these meetings. And any discussion there?
We had talked about whether we would have a PR person represent the board, a secretary to represent the board, so we don't put that load on the city staff. And I don't know where the answer, but because our chair and vice chair is not here, I would ask to roll that one over to next month and still let's continue to all think about it and talk about that one. Okay. Unless you have some recommendation, Mr. Smith.
I know this board has been very active in trying to find progressive ways to get members of the public here. I know that there was lots of announcements in the past. I know that they have gone out to community meetings. I know that individually board members have gone out there. I know the police department's gone out there to announce these meetings. There have been a lot of different efforts made in the past. So I certainly applaud this board's efforts. And I know it's been something that has been worked on from the very beginning of this. And we also know that in October, we saw a huge number of people come out. So we know that it is possible for the public to come to these meetings and to know about these meetings. Are there ways to improve that notice system? I think that was discussed in December, or at least mentioned, that one idea was to have TPD announce it on their social media site, and that has started being done. So now that's another way that the public is aware of it, through social media. So I know that we're announcing it in social media, we're posting it on web pages, the city's posting it on their calendar, and the city clerk also posted downstairs. So those are the main ways that we get out our message. I think after that, you know, the board has talked about this for years, and I would leave it to the board to discuss and see if there's other ideas they can come up with. But I think you guys have done a great job trying to get public involved.
Mr. Schmidt, is there a way to measure the hits on that website or the city's electronic calendar or anything like that? That hits that you're looking at?
That's a great question. Unfortunately, I do not know the answer to that.
Attorney Schmidt, so when you say social media for city government, are you talking the official website or are you talking about Facebook and Twitter?
We post it on our website, the TPD website, it's posted. And then in addition, we have a Twitter.
Okay.
That TPD had posted it on
Okay.
Twitter. I know we did for December. Our PIO posted that. Unfortunately, she's been out on maternity leave, so I haven't actually checked. I don't have Twitter, so
Right.
For this meeting, I can't swear to it that whether or not it got posted, but that is something that we'll be implementing going forward, is posting it on the Twitter feed.
Okay, yeah, no, my comment is everybody is very social media savvy, like the Facebook, Twitter piece, vice the actual official website. I mean, the hardcore folks get on the website,
Right.
but a lot of folks will use social media now, like real social media, as their way of communicating. So I just wanted to make sure you guys, if you're doing that, then that's fine, because that'll get out and that spreads like wildfire. So,
Correct.
thank you.
Mr. Schmidt, thank you very much.
Yes, sir.
Any other business? Any new business? Okay. As we're aware, we're typically scheduled to meet on the fourth Tuesday of the month, and the next meeting will be set for next month, March 23rd, 2021. And the public is welcome to attend our next scheduled meeting. Board members, if for some reason you are unable to attend the next meeting, please notify Ms. Mercer at least 48 hours in advance so we can ensure that an alternate will be available. Any final comments, questions? Okay, the Citizens Review Board meeting is now adjourned.
All right, good to see you again.